Okay, today we're going to do a documentary of the birds of the Vasayugan swamp, which is located in Siberia. Um, so I think first we should do like lines and veils. I guess it'll be a little bit different since this is like all nature and there's like no people, but I guess if there's anything that you can think of, I mean, nature is brutal, so.
So, I mean, some of the common lines and veils that people will bring up is things like sexual violence and violence against children. And like I can see in nature those things coming up like a lot.
Yes, that's true.
I don't need to explore any of those things and I don't plan to. So I don't mind if those are kind of like either veiled or even lined out. Like I'm cool with either way. But I'm okay. I'm okay with whatever we decide to do here.
Okay.
I would prefer those things to maybe be veiled, if anything, because that way we're not exploring them explicitly in the foreground. They're just kind of like assumed to be natural phenomenon that happens.
Yeah. I mean, especially like the violence against children, a lot of animals eat like chicks and baby animals, but violence against children, I think violence against animals might be a little unavoidable here. Do you want to have a veil over like explicit like gore or violence?
I'm okay either way. So
yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I mean, maybe nothing like super gratuitous.
Sure.
Like we don't need to like go into the details of like what viscera is flying around.
Right. Yeah, and I think I'm very comfortable, being called on the X card if like I'm going too far, or calling on it myself if I feel like you are. So yeah, I think that's cool. I think, if we start with something which might even sound gory, we can be like, and then we see some gory stuff, right? And like,
yeah, we can just be like, and then it happened.
Yeah.
Now it's over.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Okay. Let's just so let's go over like the scene structure and stuff. And like what basically like how we're gonna play, just because it's like they have some instructions on how to make it like more like a documentary, like different like techniques that you can use. Like they have do you have the PDF open?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
So like narrative principles, because I think we're really trying to go for that like National Geographic feel. So dwell on details, delight in nature, show the bird's human qualities to the audience, share the space, show the heart. So I guess it's maybe like a combination of like National Geographic and like Watership Down, like those like animal stories that like, I mean, they're like, we're really personifying the animals, but in like the descriptions, it's more really like that style of like Planet Earth or National Geographic.
Yeah, I love the fact that it kind of almost like, even though we're seeing animals, like what the show is kind of doing is illustrating the human animal and what it wants to see. Right.
I mean, even I was reading like something about nature photography, and it's like, really, it's unfortunate, but the animals we empathize with as a species are ones that we can like see human faces in, like monkeys and owls that have those big eyes and like human-like face.
Right.
Okay, we already did setting creation and bird creation. I'll share my screen for a minute so that it shows up on the recording what we did a few days ago. So we have me, Noella is a black grouse. I think it's grouse. And then Tomes is a rosette spoonbill. And a black grouse lives in Siberia, and the rosette spoonbill naturally doesn't, but we're going to pretend it does for the sake of this game. And so we kind of have, in the traits and stuff, we kind of have a mix of like, actual animal stuff, but then also more human stuff. Like for mine, my grouse wants to be in the ballet. I'm not sure if this is the human ballet or the bird ballet, but whatever. So we'll go into this during the game. And then our biome is the Vesuvian swamp in Siberia. It's, I think, the southwestern part of Siberia. I mean, it's still really cold, but it's kind of got a lot of peat bog, little pine trees, swamp, so it's a lot of water. Stop. Okay, so the structure, it looks like, is we start with an introduction scene, which is, you know, like, I'm kind of imagining like that scene from the documentary where you start with like, you're looking at the planet Earth and then you like zoom in and then we're like describing the scene, and we'll introduce the two birds there, and then we go into scenes, and it looks like we can really decide how many rounds we want to do. Each round has 2 scenes in it. I lead one scene and you lead one scene. And it can be either a solo scene where the active player plays a bird and then the other player just plays the environment, or it can be a duet scene where we each play our respective characters. And then during the scene, the active player chooses a weakness, trait, or eccentricity to express in the scene. And while you explore the bird's traits, you can take on a task. So basically, if you want to try and do something challenging, you roll 2d6, and that kind of determines what the outcome is. And then at the end of each scene, we write down the summary of the scene. And then after each round, we kind of check in with each other and see how it's going. Are we playing the tone we want for the documentary? Should we shift? Should we keep going? Do we want to keep going, or do we have enough footage for the documentary? So we kind of we decide at the end of each round. And then I think at the beginning, like when we're moving on to the next round, there's little scene prompts, and we select the 2 scenes from the prompt, like for example, like badness on the horizon, or what we learn from each other. And then also in general, what we want the next round to focus on, specific things we want to see in the scene, what weather we want for the next round, and we use 2 adjectives like wet and windy or hot and foggy. And then the round begins once we've kind of selected all those things, and then we go until we want to stop. And then while we're playing the game, we want to include documentary production values. And documentaries often try to humanize the story or bring narrative cohesion to their footage through post-production. They add music, sounds, and short narration to bring out emotion in the scene. They may also use techniques like cross-cutting, from a shot of a bird laughing to suggest the bird found humor in the situation. Feel free to use some of these techniques to emphasize emotion and story for your bird. And then the final scene is wrapping up the documentary. It's kind of looking at the scenes we did, remembering what was good, and there's a whole kind of list of things to do that we'll do when we get there. And then, you know, we end with a nice clap, like we enjoyed this documentary. It was great. and then we just have some end of the scene questions. And then if it's played as multiple sessions, there's recaps, but we don't need to do that since we're just doing one. Tones, do you have any questions? Okay.
I'm ready to explore it and play. Like I have a vague idea of what we're getting into now. Thank you. And then, yeah, I'm happy for us to kind of like see how it plays out.
Okay, so for the first introductory scene, one of us will be the narrator and one of us will be the cinematographer. Narrator doing the like, you know, narrator thing, like, and we see the rosette spoonbill in her natural habitat. And then the cinematographer is more describing those like film shots or like the environment that the viewer is seeing. So which one do you want to do?
I mean, I'm open. I'm leaning towards cinematographer, but do you have a preference?
No, you can be the cinematographer. Okay. Let's see. Do you see that little scene structure on the
Yeah,
PDF?
I'm looking at the scene structure.
I'm just going to write a few things real quick.
Yeah, take your time. While you're doing that, I'm like refamiliarizing myself with our birds and our setting, our biome. Yeah, loving this. I'm watching you. Like I'm both looking at the birds and the descriptions that we've written, but I'm also watching you write some of these first sentences, and that's driving a lot of stuff in my head as well. I think it's actually like a cool, and it's like an interesting kind of quiet space before we start the game where we're kind of like framing some of the stuff, and I think it's like for me, it's getting me in the mode, which is great. I'm gonna mute myself for just a second and get the microwave used upstairs for a minute, and then
okay.
that way it won't interrupt my Wi-Fi in a few minutes. I am back.
Okay, I think I'm ready when you're ready.
Okay, let's do this.
All right. Introducing your birds. We bring ourselves now to the frigid waters of the Vasyugan Swamp, located in the southwestern part of Siberia, Russia. The swamp is located in Novosibirsk, Omsk, and Tomsk regions of Russia along the west bank of the Ob River.
So there's this helicopter or like low flying plane shot of just kind of the landscape passing under, and we don't see, this is not forest. This is definitely like everything looks kind of almost like plains, like everything is very low to the ground. We see this kind of strange pattern of kind of dark green, must be trees or bushes, but kind of interlaced between these little pocket lakes and this kind of like the yellow green plains that are around them. So we see a bunch of those interspersed. But there's also a couple of other like there's definitely like this cut of shots. So we see some of that coming under us. Then we see some shots of like the strange like red and orange landscape with little copses of pine trees mixed in there in the middle of that. And probably when that's happening, there's some guy in the background's like, hey, that's not actually part of the this particular, and somebody's like shushing them, like the cinematographer's like, shh. And it's gorgeous though, right? I mean, it's this beautiful landscape coming under us.
Small pine trees dot the landscape, emerging from the peat bogs.
This is when we get a little bit more of a closer shot, and we're getting this. I think it kind of matches this other picture we took earlier of the biome where, we're close to the water and we're actually seeing some dead trees and a couple of little pine trees. And there's this beautiful, like stark red sunrise or sunset, right? It's not dark yet, though. I mean, there's definitely enough light in the sky. And we're seeing it, kind of like a mix of clouds and a little bit of clearness here and there. But as we're seeing this kind of like, and we're now getting the sense of, okay, kind of swampy, right? Because we see the water and all these trees kind of coming straight out of the water, right? And we're seeing in the background, just kind of like teasing us. We don't quite get to see their forms yet, but we're seeing the birds, right? There's a couple of birds kind of like kind of skittering across the water, like half flapping and half kind of swimming, almost like when you see ducks kind of land or that kind of thing.
Yeah. As we arrive, we see quite an odd bird strutting through the water. This is the rosette spoonbill, and we can see her zooming her beak back and forth in a swooping motion through the water.
And, the first thought probably to anybody seeing this is, oh, it looks kind of like a flamingo, only because there's this bright red body, right? Like the feathers have this pink and red hue. And it also has those kind of stilt legs, right? So we see it walking through this shallow water with its stilt legs. But, at first we don't see its nose, its bill, but we see it kind of, moving back and forth as if it's kind of searching in the water with its bill, right? And suddenly it pops up, like it looks like it scares, a little critter. We don't even know what it is, if it's maybe a little frog or lizard or something, scares it out of the water, and it jumps up in front of it, and we see it lift its head real quick and snap out, and it's got this, the bill is kind of like long, and then it's got this big kind of flat plate. So unlike a duck bill, which is kind of short, this one has like this long, weird bill, but it snaps it right in the middle of the air.
On the relatively solid ground of the peat bog, we see the black grouse waddling through the grass, pecking for insects and leaves.
Yeah, and now we have this area which is not covered in water, but we can tell it's still part of the same biome. There's these short little bushes and trees around, and at first we almost don't notice it, and then from under this little pine tree comes out this kind of these cute, you almost think of it as like a quail or something, right? Like it's got a little bit of a meteor body, short legs, and it's kind of, walking quickly amongst the undergrowth. And at first we only see the one in the foreground, but we can see there's a couple of them in the background as well. And, just this little chubby like bird body. And yeah, it's pecking around. Amongst these very short grasses, right?
Okay, so I will conclude it. While located in the frigid north of Siberia, this miraculous bastion of life is home to many endangered species.
Nice.
All right. So for round one, let's pick let's pick the weather, and I guess for the first round it can be like an introductory round. Yeah, let's not do like specific scene prompts yet, and just do like kind of introductory stuff. What kind of weather do you want to have?
I think it would be like, we've already seen this kind of, the scenery, right? And we know that the viewer is going to be like, ooh, these are some interesting looking landscapes. They don't look like the normal kind of like swamp, that's more temperate. It doesn't look like a forest that's like a big cold forest. It looks weird, right? It's different. And I kind of like the idea that the producer's like, oh, it's a foggy day. Let's make this the opening shot, right? Like it's all like fog and mysterious or something like that.
You want to be active player in scene one or scene two?
I'm okay either way. I'll be the active player. Does it say? Oh, so the active player plays the bird in a solo scene, and then the other player plays the environment, right?
Yeah, in a solo scene, yes.
Does one of us play the narrator in the solo scene?
Yes, like the non-active player.
Okay, so do we want to do like a duet scene? Because this is kind of introductory-ish. We're not using a prompt yet. Maybe we're seeing a little bit of both birds. What do you think?
Sure.
Or does duet scene like we're actually seeing them interact, right? In some way?
Yeah, duet scene, I think the birds interact.
Maybe we won't see that yet. I think we should go for like maybe solo scene at first, so we can get a sense of each of these birds, and then we can kind of see how they,
yeah. Okay, so now, I put you as active player for scene one. Now you pick a weakness, trait, or eccentricity to express in the scene. And then we play until that trait kind of comes out and we treat it. Okay.
I think the trait that we want to play up in the beginning for the spoonbill is the intimidation defense mechanism.
Okay.
This is like the beginning of the show, and they're like, ooh, we want to start with like a bang, like something, in your face and get people excited.
Okay, so during the scene, I don't think we have to decide this yet. We'll do it when we get there, but the bird may take on a task. And so if you attempt to do something challenging in the scene, you roll a 2d6 and that determines. I have a feeling this might be like when you try and like intimidate a predator or something. So we'll we'll see how that goes.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll be like the narrator / cinematographer, and you will be the spoonbill.
All right. And as far as the play structure goes, we can kind of we're just taking turns.
Yeah, I think not sure if there's like a specific person who's supposed to go first, but yeah, I think it's really just taking turns. I mean,
okay.
since you're the active player, you can like set the scene.
Sure. And I'm happy if we kind of play it where we'll take turns, but whoever goes first can be based on like if somebody's got an idea or whatever is fine. So sure, I think we've got the spoonbill, and we see in this case it's not just an individual, right? There's maybe a couple of them, and we're seeing that same kind of image that we saw in the introduction video. There's one of them which is standing on its stilt legs and kind of looking around a little bit in the center of this kind of a low water area, and we see a couple of trees kind of sticking out, so it's definitely kind of this low swamp. And there's 2 or 3 others that they're spaced a little bit apart. They're not right next to each other, right? I mean, they look like they've got their own little territories that they're foraging in, and they're doing that weird motion, right, where the head is kind of going back and forth as they're walking forward. They're kind of like foraging in the low water. And even the one that was standing up and kind of looking around in the center, we see it look around for a moment, but then stick its head down, and it's doing the same thing.
Yeah. So it's a foggy day, so we're seeing the spoonbills kind of strutting through the water, through the fog, and in the background, you can it's quiet except for some like kind of like echoey flute music, sort of like the appropriative like Native American flute that some documentaries have, just kind of making it seem a little bit eerie, a little bit mysterious.
It's timed, so when they change from that shot of the birds from a distance, you see, maybe 4 of them at this point kind of doing their thing. Right when the flute does this kind of like the music changes tempo a little bit and kind of like stops, and then there's like these little pointed flute sounds. We see the zoomed in shot of the spoonbill, and we're seeing it kind of in its total body, right? One of them like lifts its head, and we see the water dripping off the bill. And in the background, just at that moment, it's standing in front of a little pine tree, and the pine tree looks like a full-grown pine tree, right? But it's pretty small compared to what we're used to. So it makes this spoonbill just look like regal and huge and ominous.
In the spoonbill species, the female is larger and more intimidating than the male, and often when facing challengers to its territory or predators, she will display a frightening. She will engage in a frightening display of dominance and aggression.
And that spoonbill at that point, even though this may not be its actual display of aggression, because we hear that background, right, that narration. At this point, the spoonbill, who's a little bit wet from her foraging, gets up and kind of flaps her wings for a moment. And when she does so, it's a huge wingspan, right? And it looks pretty big, like a huge angel or something, right? and we see the water kind of like flick off everywhere.
And at this point, we kind of pan up towards one of those pine trees, and we see a very large golden eagle sitting in the pine tree. And then we hear this narration. Many raptors make their home in the Vasugan swamp and prey upon the other birds. Here we see the majestic golden eagle eyeing the spoonbills for lunch.
And that's when we see a much smaller spoonbill. But and at first, you know, the thought is like, oh, maybe this is a child. But, you know, after our narration, we actually realize, oh, this is one of the males, right? It's like half the size of one of the females, and it's standing kind of in the middle, like or at least the way the shot is gives us, we can see this little male which is standing in the middle of the water, and then like these three females equidistant from it, but they're all kind of foraging and heading in like different directions, right? And this is right after we saw this raptor, right? So it looks like it's unprotected.
At this point, we see, like in slow motion, the golden eagle kind of take off from the branch and do this like really cool slow motion flying towards the spoonbill. And then as it goes towards the spoonbill, it kind of cuts back into regular time, and you see it fly towards the spoonbill, the male spoonbill.
The male, you know, we see it stop and its head come out of the water. So it gives us this feel like, oh, it knows this attack is coming, right? And we get this quick shot over to one of the females, you know, which is, you know, like a different shot, right? Where we see the smaller male kind of a little bit in the background and this larger female in the foreground. And we see it start making like a quack quack sound, and it kind of gets up out of the water, and it's starting to open up its wings.
At this point, it's time for you to roll 2d6.
Yes. And I think it would be interesting if like we see the display, like whether or not the display succeeds or not is different, but it'd be cool if like they actually show if the footage of like, you know, what the display looks like. It may not even be from the same time, right? It could be like this is, but yeah. You know, as we imagine, we've already seen like the wingspan and whatever. So it's definitely like this display is like this big, you know, it's trying to make itself look huge, kind of like we always tell people to do with, you know, mountain lions or something, just like look like you're big so that they're scared of you, right? And it's doing that thing. All right.
And you do get +1 because you're playing to a trait or eccentricity.
Got it. So I will roll 2d6 + 1. And I will choose the, ooh, wow. Look at Roll for Your Party has so many different die colors now.
Yeah, they must have updated.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. I'll choose pink because in the character keeper, my bird is pink. All right, so 7 + 1 is 8. What does that mean?
So,
oh no.
It's a success, but it's somehow complicated.
Yes.
So you decide on the complication.
And
if you don't have any ideas, I can help, but
I have an idea. I kind of think the complication is just that they've pushed this on to like the next prey, right? Yeah. So like right now, the narrator said that the what was it, the golden falcons, golden eagles,
golden eagles
prey on birds in this area. So I think what would look cool is like, yeah, the golden eagle comes down and we see this huge display of kind of like aggression, and it kind of it's like when you see two birds attacking each other and one's like flicking around the other, like it's coming toward that group, but then kind of like the golden eagle veers to the side, and kind of takes wing again, but does like a little circle and goes down and maybe gets one of the like a black grouse which is nearby or something.
Yes, I think the golden eagle definitely. You see it as the display. It kind of shows the golden eagle like kind of veering off, and then I think it cuts to the. This might not even be like at the same time, but the footage has it spliced together. So you see the golden eagle going off, and the narrator saying, "The spoonbills may be safe for now, but the black grouse is not so lucky." And then you see the eagle kind of swoop in and grab one. I think if you're good, I think that's a good end to the scene.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Okay, so I will be active player next. We have to do a little summary.
Yeah, scene conclusion. When the scene is finished, write down what happened. And then we'll switch turns.
Okay, why don't you, since you're active player, you write the summary.
All right, then I wrote, the spoonbills are feeding when a golden eagle watches and takes flight to attack a smaller male. The female uses her intimidation defense mechanism and scares it off, but it circles and takes a black grouse instead. And so these going back and forth scenes are part of the same round, right? So this is round one, is my scene and then your scene.
Yes. Okay. So for scene 2, this is going to be a solo scene, and I am going to focus on my weakness, being afraid of heights. Okay, so after the golden eagle picks off a different black grouse, we kind of the documentary kind of shifts focus over to looking at some of the black grouse, and you see my particular black grouse kind of pecking around, and then he flies up into one of the pine trees, and then kind of settling onto the branch.
And again, at first we get the sense like, oh, this is a very big tree, but then we realize it's kind of not, just based on some of the other kind of background, things, whether that's plants or other little animals that are around. The grouse settles there, and the narrator probably chimes in. We can see the grouse is able to reach some of the branches here in the tree. It's a safer proposition than down on the tundra, proper.
And then, so this is a male grouse, and then two female grouse kind of also fly up from the ground and settle on a higher branch. And you can see the little male grouse kind of look up at them.
It looks like this male grouse wants to join his compatriots. However, an interesting thing about the grouse, they are not so comfortable high up in the air.
And then you can see him kind of like walking around on the branch a little bit, but kind of deciding what to do. And I think I'll roll here.
Sounds great. I love that it looks all nervous.
And that's a -1. So that's a 5. So it's a success, but something goes wrong.
And if I'm correct in reading the book, there's only like 2 results, right? 9+ is like the bird succeeds at what it's doing, and 8- is the success is complicated, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's a fail.
Right.
Which
do we want to read the level of success kind of by the number, like the level of complication? Like my complication was very light, right? Like
yeah,
the birds were fine and some other bird got.
Sure, we can do that.
And we don't have to put too much thinking in it. It doesn't have to be too strict. But like if it's a low roll, we can kind of be a little more brutal. And if it's a very high roll, then maybe it could be like really something cool.
Yeah. I think that Mr. Grouse flies up to. Okay. So I'll just this young bachelor grouse works up his courage and flies to the higher branch. Oh, but he didn't stick the landing quite well. Kind of flaps all around. Oh, and these ladies aren't very impressed. They say hello, but then take off for another tree.
I love that it just looks very clumsy, right? Like it's like trying to grab onto the branches, but then kind of like stumbles, and there's like a lower branch it kind of grabs, and then and it just looks very kind of haphazard.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's good for the scene since we did the complication.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, so I will write the conclusion. The black grouse flies up to a branch in the tree. 2 female grouses fly up to a branch above him, but he is afraid of heights and is nervous. He works up the courage to go up there, but does not stick the landing and gets his feathers in a bunch trying to land. The 2 females are not impressed and end up leaving for a different tree.
Awesome.
Great. So now we'll go to round 2. First, how's your hunger factor?
I'm good to keep going. If we want to do like one more round, and then maybe we can take the short snack break.
Sure. So
this is the round over. It says briefly check in. And then as far as like tone and stuff, I mean, I'm cool with how things are going. To me, if I was watching this, I'd be like, okay, I'm getting a feel for these two critters and kind of weird personality traits. Like I want to see more.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think we're doing good with the narration and cinematography stuff. So, what do you want the next round to focus on?
So it says select 2 scenes from the prompt list together. So, and then discuss what you'd want it to focus on. And there's all these scene prompts. Let me take a look at them. I haven't really looked at the list yet.
Yeah, I really want to see them interacting.
Yes. Ooh, okay. I want to see building a nest with maybe with the spoonbills and then there's making friends, like, but there could be a different one too.
Yeah, let's do making friends and building a nest. I think maybe making friends first and then building a nest.
Sure. Yeah, I love it. I would like to see, like, if you want to go first with the making friends part, I have at least an idea for some of the building the nest thing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And it works into like some of the traits that we built up.
What do you want the weather to be?
I think we could make it like it looks like things have warmed up a little bit. Maybe like the fog is kind of receded, so it just looks like a normal kind of, I don't know, spring or fall type day in whatever this climate is.
Yeah. I'm going to do clear, slightly warm, you know, relative to being in Siberia. So, yeah, I will do scene 1. And Tomes will do scene 2. Yeah, I want to do a duet scene for this one. So in this scene, first we see the black grouse sort of inching towards the water. He's on the peat bog, and we can see kind of the rosette spoonbill in the water, just doing her thing. And I'm kind of, you know, with my little beak kind of tapping at the water. And the thing I want to focus on is concerned about appearance. So I'm like grooming.
We can see that the black grouse is grooming himself here. You know, appearance is a very important characteristic. I think we just that's the narration we hear, and right when we hear that narration, it's definitely like a shot of the grouse in the foreground, like near the water's edge. So, you know, I think he was like picking around near the water or whatever, and then we see him stop and kind of like, oh well, you know, like you said, like he was starting to groom. So we hear that narration, and in the background we still see the rosebill, the spoonbill, but it's, you know, kind of like unfocused, like in the distance.
Yeah. So I think the spoonbill, like we kind of see that, and we see the grouse grooming a little bit more, and we see the spoonbill coming closer. She doesn't necessarily notice him yet, I think, but he sees her and he starts to like puff himself up a little bit, not to be aggressive, but to kind of like look like prim and proper and look good.
These two birds are these two birds are normally seen to be fairly chummy in this environment. And we can tell, like, whoever the narrator is, like, chummy's a word in their, whatever their, English is. And we maybe we see a little bit of like the two interacting, right? So like you said, the grouse is making that movement, and maybe the spoonbill kind of like stops her kind of like feed direction, and kind of like looks over at him, and doesn't seem too fussed. I mean, the last time we saw her in the big, aggressive defense frame. So, we're like, ooh, is this going to be drama? But the narrator kind of like makes it sound like they're friends, and they don't look like, there's any beef between them, right?
Yeah. So the narrator says, and we can look at and we can see the intense interaction between them, almost as if they were conversing as humans would. And you kind of see them bobbing their heads up and down, flapping a little bit. And I'm going to roll for like appearance. Like, I'm going to say I'm trying to like impress you. So I got an 8. So, yeah, it's like almost a complete success, but not quite. So I'm going to say that it's complicated in that I slip and fall into the water. And so we see I'm trying to be like, look at me, I'm so pretty. And then I slip and fall into the water.
And we see the spoonbill, was kind of like looking over and then just turns and goes on eating. And the narrator's like, it doesn't look like this particular spoonbill is very impressed.
Yes. And then I think that is a good end to the scene.
Nice. So, oh yeah, let me let you do the summary, and I'll look at the beginning scene prompts.
The grouse is grooming himself by the water when he sees the spoonbill. He puffs himself up to look good, and they seem to be chummy with each other. He slips and falls into the water. The spoonbill swims away, not looking very impressed.
Awesome. Hold on just a second. Hold on, I need just a minute. All right, I'm back. Okay. So I've got an idea for the next scene. I think we're seeing the spoonbill. So the the trait that I want to concentrate on. So we were looking at a couple things. We wanted to see how the birds interact. So these are duet scenes. We also, the scene prompt that I think you used was making friends, right?
Yeah.
And in mine, I'm going to use building a nest. And so, and the trait I want to focus on is the eccentricity of the spoonbill to adopt other animals, right? At least temporarily, or sometimes temporarily. So I think the scene starts with, we see the spoonbill, and we see it walking over to, it looks like the base of a, almost like a swamp type tree. Like, it might be, some smaller tree with like bigger root systems. So they're kind of like surrounded by some, there's a little bit of water and a little bit of dry land, but we can see a little nest that's been created kind of at the base of this tree in between the roots and the root system.
Yeah, and we see the spoonbill kind of walking towards this kind of arranging things, and then the camera cuts, kind of like pans over to nearby where we see the black grouse. And actually, I think we can see the scene. So he's sitting in a tree, and we see him fall out of the tree and kind of bounce and like hurt himself and kind of limp in the direction of the spoonbill. And I think there's like dramatic music. We like the there's like kind of like the kind of calm flute music, and then we see it and it kind of picks up, and then he like falls and plops down onto the ground, and he kind of like limps in the direction of the spoonbill.
And the spoonbill, we see it like, it flicks another shot, and we see the spoonbill, getting into its nest, and a couple of smaller baby spoonbills there. And we hear maybe the narrator say, like, the spoonbill has a very strong parental instinct and loves to take care of its children. And it starts like the narration kind of like starts there, but there's like a ... that's implied at the end of that.
And I think we see the grouse kind of pass by the nest and kind of like take a moment to rest. And we can see the spoonbill, I think, extend that long wing and like use it to pull the grouse into the nest. And then the narration says, as well as other pitiful creatures, it decides to adopt.
Yes, and we see it like lean down, like right after that, like everybody's like, what? Like we see there's these little babies in the nest, as well as now this grouse, and we see the spoonbill kind of like leaning down to feed, like the babies, and it goes like baby, 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 and then it leans down and it's feeding the grouse. Right?
Yes. I think you should roll now.
Yes, that sounds good. All right. And it's a +1 because why did you have a -1 in your roll? I can't remember.
Because it was my weakness.
Oh, it was your weakness. Got it. So if it's a trait
or an eccentricity, it's +1. If it's weakness, it's -1.
Got it. That makes all the sense. So here we have a 6, +1 is still a 7. So that is a not success, or not full success. I kind of have an idea.
Sure.
I think the part of the feeding is okay. I think the part that bites the spoonbill in the butt is, or I think it will bite it in the beak in this case, is that it's also adopted another creature, right? And so like we heard, adopting other creatures, and we see that it's not just the babies and the grouse in the nest. There's also like a little turtle or something.
Yes.
And the last thing we heard the narrator said was like, adopting other, what was it, like unfortunate
Like, yeah,
creatures or
like pitiful
pitiful
creatures.
creatures. And, it goes down to feed this little turtle that's sitting there. And the turtle like reaches out and like picks at its beak, and we see it like jump back. And the narrator chimes up again and is like, unfortunately, not all creatures wish to be adopted. A lesson that the spoonbill is sometimes hard to learn, or something like that.
Yes. Okay.
And there's like this, the shot ends with them showing like the turtle finally crawling out of like the nest and like getting out of there.
Escaping.
Right? Yeah, escaping.
Okay. So why don't you write the summary?
Okay. I wrote, a spoonbill is seen approaching its nest and babies. An injured grouse falls from the tree nearby, and the spoonbill adopts it temporarily, bringing it into the nest for feeding. During this time, all are fed, but a turtle that has unwillingly been adopted strikes the spoonbill's beak and leaves the nest upset.
That's good. Okay, so how do you think it's going so far?
Yeah, I'm digging it. Like we're starting to see like I like that we had this first kind of like the solo scene, so we see the two birds, but then now like getting to see them interact in like the two different scenes, like you get this kind of sense for um, their weird like community vibe.
Yes.
um, yeah, no, it's cool. What do you think?
I think it's good too.
Yeah, it's neat. Cool. So what do you think? Should we take a little break?
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab something to eat upstairs.
Okay, yeah.
How much time do you want?
10 minutes?
Okay. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Is that enough for you?
Yeah, that'll be enough. All right. I am fed.
Good. What'd you have?
This morning I made just some leftover quesadilla, meaning it's fresh quesadillas, but with leftovers in them.
Oh,
So it's like cheese.
So put the leftovers in the quesadillas.
Yes, because I like my quesadillas fresh, and I have like an iron skillet which I do it on, so like the tortilla comes out like nice and crispy and yummy. I put butter first to make sure, like I've got high standards for my quesadilla. But then the inside was leftover salmon and like some mushroom kale mixed stuff, like just whatever I could throw in there.
That sounds tasty.
It was good. And like the best is our guacamole. That's why.
Yeah.
But yeah. What about you? Did you eat anything?
Not yet.
Are you one of those people who doesn't eat breakfast till like noon?
No, it's more like I don't have any food here that I want to eat, so I like go outside of the house to eat.
Okay.
So
that's cool.
After we finish this, I'm gonna go to campus anyway, so I'll just eat when I get there.
Got it. But you look like you're doing okay. You're not energy deprived.
No, I'm okay.
All right, cool.
Yeah. How many more rounds do you want to do?
I'm open. I would definitely like to do at least one more to kind of explore some of those other, like some of the other traits and weaknesses and eccentricities.
Yeah.
So I think that's worth doing. So like at a minimum one, but like I'm down to do like maybe two more or whatever, like whatever you're open to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one or two more would be good.
Okay. I think at least one more, I'll have a feel for kind of how the game works a little bit. And then maybe that'll give me an idea of, because I know Kyle and Lauren, who, by the way, internet designed this game, this is still in like Kyle and Lauren designed this and it's still in like beta mode, right? Kind of. Am I coming out okay? You're coming out a little frozen. I don't know if it's me. Am I the one who's freezing?
It's me. My Wi-Fi is disconnecting.
Got it. Okay. I will pause. You just came back from your long pause.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. So
do you think
I didn't hear what you said.
Or okay. But do you think you're stable again? If this is being recorded by the internet, I will wait for Noella to come back.
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It cycles through a few times before it's settled. Okay.
Yeah. All I was saying was if we do at least one more scene, I think, because Kyle and Lauren, like this is still kind of like the beta draft of the game, right? Like that'll give me, I think, enough of a feel to be able to give any kind of feedback constructively, right?
Yeah.
So I'm down for one or two more rounds.
Yeah, let's see how this one goes.
Cool.
Okay, let's what do you want to let's pick I think let's pick the two scene prompts.
Okay. Let me jump back there. I kind of like the idea of a stranger enters.
Yeah.
I don't mind doing this as solo or as duet, whichever. Maybe if I expected two more rounds, then I would do this one as a solo one and then like tie it off with a duet one.
Sure.
Put it that way.
See, you want to do a stranger enters, and
oh, so I don't know if you're down for this, but like a stranger enters, like even though we do solo scenes where it's us, in our own solo scene, the stranger could be shared between us.
Yeah.
So it's not really a duet scene where we're interacting, but we're maybe each individually interacting with whatever the stranger is. And so one of the scene prompts could also be a chase. Like one of us could do like the stranger enters, the other one could have like the chase. I don't know.
Sure, that sounds fun. Do you want to be scene one or scene two?
I'm open. I don't know who the stranger is, so whoever has scene one, I guess we'll decide maybe the stranger enters.
Since you were two last time, why don't you be one this time?
Okay. So why don't I do a stranger enters?
Yeah.
And in my, I think the trait that I want, oh, we have to decide about the weather.
Yeah.
Right? Huh. Well, I think in this environment, given that it's a swamp, there's probably going to be a lot of weather turnover. Is that right? So yeah, maybe that'll be interesting. Like if the weather change, kind of instigates this new stranger and whatever happens from it. Do you think it's going to be like a rain or something?
Yeah, maybe there's a big storm.
I like that.
Big storm. So what? So do you want to do solo?
Yeah, we'll do solo scenes.
And then what? What trait do you want to use?
I want to explore the trait of clumsy flyer, the weakness.
Sure. Okay, so let's start then.
Okay. So as the active player, I'll kind of go first here. I think we see the spoonbill. The last scene we saw it with its nest, right? And so, it's near a tree. Like I think the footage shows it's near a tree that looks similar. So we kind of assume it's in its like home area, but we don't see the nest there. And the spoonbill is, just kind of like standing on its hind legs with its, wings in, when we hear like that crash of like the thunder and we see a little bit of the lightning and kind of that shift of weather that we were just talking about, right?
Sorry, I don't know if I missed this, but where is the spoonbill?
I think it's just near a tree that looks similar to the last scene, like where its nest was. So maybe whatever its home, like it looks like a similar environment.
Yeah.
But it's just standing there and we're seeing the weather change, right? The crash of the thunder and the rain start to come down.
Are you okay if I decide what the stranger is?
Absolutely.
So the spoonbill, I think, is sitting at the base of the tree, kind of watching the rain start to come down, and then I think we can hear the narrator say, as the cycles of time and weather pass, the spoonbill watches. But then in the distance, she hears something strange, and then you hear like a little like like a little yipping, and then the camera, and then you can see the camera zooms to a little wolf puppy kind of running up to the tree, and it kind of I think it runs to the other side that she's on to like take shelter from the rain, and then you start to see it peek around and look at her.
Nice. And I think the narrator even we'll make a callback here to the last scene, right? Because I think that we see the spoonbill kind of like flutter its wings, so it kind of reminds us a little bit of that like aggressive display, although it's not doing exactly that yet. And it starts making this sound like quack, 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 quack. And, the narrator's like, this is the callback. It's like, although the spoonbill, will take on other animals and care for them, it does have certain boundaries.
And then you see the little puppy as the spoonbill's going like quack 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 quack. The puppy is like woof 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 woof, and you can kind of see him like walking up, like starting to like pad towards her.
And definitely, you know, she takes like one or two steps back, and we see her, I think, try to take flight. And this is where we're gonna roll some dice and see how it goes. I think even that little puppy's gonna scare her off the ground. So I'm gonna re-roll my dice, and I have -1 because this is our weakness.
Yeah.
And I got an 8, so that comes out to be a 6. And so that is a not so good success. So she will get away, of course, but I think what comes on display is, you know, they are not very good flyers. And I think a success would have looked, you would have seen the clumsy flying, but she still would have gracefully like gotten somewhere. I think in this case, we see, you know, as the narrator picks up and says, you know, the spoonbill at this point decides to take herself somewhere else, distance herself from this possible threat. And it's saying threat just as you see this little like wolf puppy like bound over, so it looks a little funny. But she starts to take flight, and like you can see like the whole body's going back and forth. Like it just does not look like this animal knows anything about flying. Almost like when you see a chicken fly, kind of, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of worse. And it, like the whole bird kind of goes sideways, and you see one wing, like the body actually like hit a low-lying branch and break the branch, and then it kind of like flies through that, and you know, eventually we see it kind of like land clumsily on some branch, and we hear the narrator finish with, "Flying is not its strong suit."
Yes. I think that's good for the end of the scene. So you go and write the summary.
Okay. So my summary is, the weather changes and a storm begins. A stranger enters the scene, a young wolf pup, curious about the spoonbill. The bird makes some sounds in an initial display, but then tries to take flight. She crashes through a smaller branch and ungracefully lands on a larger one. Flying is not her strong suit.
Great. So for scene number 2, we see the grouse. I think under like a different tree, but it's kind of close by. It's still raining a little bit, and the grouse is just kind of sitting around, not really doing much because it's raining.
And that last scene, we saw the little wolf pup, kind of like barking or yipping up at the spoonbill, and now we see it still like sniffing around where the spoonbill had taken off, sniffing in that area. Maybe it even raises a leg and urinates a little bit, and then we see it kind of like bound off toward where the grouse is. Sitting. It's kind of like sniffing its way through the ground.
Yeah. The grouse occupies itself with the grass around it, with the grass under the tree as it waits for the storm to abate. Unbeknownst to it, a great predator approaches.
And we see the little puppy again bounding. Like, I think this whole time the audience is like, oh, that means the wolf, mother or parent will be around. But no, we don't see any of that. It's still just this little pup, right?
It's just a little puppy.
Yeah. And I think the narrator even continues in saying, it looks like the predator has caught a scent of something interesting. And we see it like smelling them some more and heading in that direction.
The pup kind of approaches, and as we see it get closer and closer to the grouse suddenly like pops its head up and then like looks around and sees it. And I'm using the trait like easily scared and afraid of predators, and like the grouse just like bolts from under the tree into the rain. And I'm gonna roll here to kind of see how this chase is going to go. So that's a 10. So why don't you go and kind of describe what this puppy does?
Sure. I think the puppy starts to chase it, but the grouse is going a lot faster, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the narrator says, even the rain is preferable to the predator. And, and the grouse kind of like runs out into the rain, and the little puppy's chasing it. But, this is where the narrator's telling you about, its ability. It's like the grouse has survival instincts, but more than that, it has speed on its side. And we see it like zoom past, right? And this little puppy obviously just can't even keep up, right? And now is just sitting in the middle of the rain and stops, and like it's just getting poured on as the grouse is taken off.
Oh, I think that's a good end to the scene, even though I'm sad for the puppy. He just needs friends.
Awesome. While you're writing that up, I get to enjoy a ginger chew.
The grouse is sitting under a tree, taking shelter from the rain. The pup, the great predator, approaches. As the pup gets closer, the grouse notices his presence. The grouse bolts into the rain, and while the little wolf gives chase, the grouse has speed on its side. Our last shot is of the puppy sitting in the rain, looking dejected.
Awesome. Love it.
So how is this documentary going for you?
I think it's hitting the right marks. I think like if you're down for it, I'd like one more round where we can do like a duet thing, and that would be like a good way to like wrap it up. Now, if we have more than 4 rounds, like it looks like the number of eccentricities and traits and things that we build in the beginning of the game is 2 traits, a weakness, and an eccentricity, right? So like
and then
4 things.
I think we were also supposed to pick a shared third trait, which I think we forgot to do.
Oh, right. Do we have an idea for one? This might work in well for the duet scene, but I can also see having our separate things works pretty well.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas?
I mean, we could go to like the next generation and look at like either what their something about either their mating type calls or situation, or something about how they maybe like lay their eggs or raise their children. Like it could be something around that. Maybe they both have nests that are on the ground, for example, instead of in trees, or I don't know, something like that.
Why don't we have like a little spoonbill and a little grouse that were like raised in the same nest?
Oh, yeah, that sounds great. I like it.
And then what's a trait that we can focus on? I don't know. They both have weird parents.
Oh, yeah. I like the idea. They're both
like it's a weird like cross species co-parenting situation.
Yeah.
Trying to like make it work.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, which scene prompts do you want to do? I like what we learn from each other.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe what?
Go ahead. What were you gonna suggest?
I was gonna suggest like playing and relaxing.
That could be really cool. Another one is a moment of confusion, because that would be
actually. I think a moment of confusion is really good. Maybe we could do scene 1, a moment of confusion, and scene 2, what we learn from each other.
That sounds good. I like it.
What's the weather?
I mean, given the storm, I think it should change. Like this is the more pleasant, like babies and new life. So it should feel like kind of like spring, like the sun has come out, and but maybe you see like the initial scene is like with the sun, and you can see the dripping off the plants. And even if the next scene isn't right afterwards, you have a feeling like, oh, the rain just ended or something like that, right?
Yes. I will do scene 1. I just like to alternate the order. And then are you fine with scene 2?
Yeah, that sounds good.
And yeah, and I'm doing the shared trait. Raised in same nest, weird parents. Okay. So we see these 2 little balls of fluff in the spoonbill's nest. And I think the spoonbills, off in the water, and the grouse is kind of near the nest, pecking in the grass. And you see these two little chicks almost just like looking at each other.
And you know, maybe it's even that you know, we see them looking at each other, but then there's also that moment of like, you know, you very often see the chicks kind of like sleeping, and we can see like it's almost when you see those, you know, cats that are kind of like intertwined, like we see the two birds and like one is like resting on the other, and the narrator is like, you know, despite their differences, growing up in the same nest leads to feelings of bondship.
And then I think we see the little grousey kind of little hop out of the nest and kind of wander around. And then I think we see her kind of try and go into the water and like you see her like moving her beak back and forth as she's like walking into the water, but then we see that she can't really swim. So and I'll roll for this to see. She responds. It's a 5. So something goes wrong, and what goes wrong is that she can't swim, and that she's not this is not her like what she's supposed to be, how she's supposed to be eating, the way that her body is set up. And so I think that Mama Spoonbill has to come assist.
Yeah. And maybe we see that Mama Spoonbill come up behind, like there's this moment where, you know, she's drowning and stuff, right? Like she's starting to struggle, and maybe the narrator's even like, you know, despite their closeness, some things just can't be learned. And, you know, things are not looking good for our baby grouse. And like, you know, like I think the audience is like, oh crap, maybe she'll drown, right? But then, yeah, I think the spoonbill, we see the spoonbill, like the adult, like lift it up from its butt and kind of like push it up onto the shore.
Mm-hmm. And then the camera follows her as she waddles and like is kind of shaking up the waddle, and we see the mama grouse kind of pushing the spoonbill towards the water and like waving the little grouse over to show it how to peck in the grass. Yeah, I think that's a good ending.
Yep. And then I think, oh, I have an idea. So I think it's like one of the, oh, so let me let you write up the summary. I always forget about that.
We see the spoonbill chick and grouse chick snuggling in the nest. Baby grouse hops out of the nest and goes towards the water and attempts to start feeding like a spoonbill. However, she can't swim and starts to drown. The narrator comments, "Unfortunately, despite their closeness, some things cannot be learned." Mama Spoonbill lifts her back up onto land. Mama Grouse ushers her over while pushing baby Spoonbill towards the water.
Nice. Okay, I have an idea for this this next scene. So this one is learning from each other. And we're still playing kind of with the same trait, right?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Like raised in the same nest, weird parents kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think, you know, we have one of those like scenes of the environment changing, and they're like, you know, summer quickly rolls in, and we get this like quick speed, you know, time sense that, you know, we see some of the water evaporating, you know, from some of the climate, you know, some of the environment, and like these big pools of water that we had before, now we see there's less of that, right? It's a little bit of a drier, you know, kind of like grassland and tundra, you know, kind of look, right? And maybe the narrator is like, you know, during some of the seasons, you know, some of the climates here quickly change, and the water that maybe you relied on is now not available in all places.
I think we see the spoon, like, I think now the babies are juveniles, so we see them kind of walking together through the grass, and I think kind of trying to find like little bugs that might have little water in them and eating grass.
And I think the narrator chimes up and says, you know, in some places in the Vasugan swamp, you know, water is available all year round, but here, you know, learning how to forage without water is of great benefit. And I think we're seeing, you know, one of the spoonbills kind of like pecking at the ground just behind, like right after we see one of the grouse do it, right? Like the grouse is pecking, and then right behind it we see this spoonbill walk by, and it's also pecking at the ground.
I think even as we see it pecking at the ground, we see it kind of doing the like
like back and forth,
the crescent back and forth, zooming that it does in the water, and we can also see the grouse start to do that kind of zooming just with the pecking too. And we hear the narrator say, "We see this grouse and spoonbill that have grown up together, sharing their adaptations with the other."
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I'll roll right there, right? Ooh, 6. That gives us +1, I guess, which is a 7.
Yeah.
And trying to think what the complication might be. It could be that you know, maybe the despite this change and the fact that it gets some sustenance during this time, like this is not it's not the way that it's meant to forage.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe still times are tough for the spoonbill, right? I wonder how easy that'll be to see, though, like the things that they're eating or whatever, right? Maybe it's just a narration thing.
Yeah,
right?
I think despite these adaptations to the conditions, the spoonbill goes a little bit hungry.
Yeah. You know, and goes a little bit hungry, and you know, waits for the time of plenty to come back again in the fall with the rains. But yeah, I think that's good. Like the two of them walking back, like one in front of the other, like kind of like with those shared mannerisms. I think that's a fantastic ending.
Yeah. So let's do the final scene. Do you want to be A or B?
I don't know. Let's see. What is A or B? So A, picks a scene and narrates a moment when they were different, describes stuff, B describes some stuff. So we're just kind of going back and forth, but we have different like prompts basically.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. I can do A.
Okay.
Sure. So so if you can think you have enough footage as can, wrap up, take a few minutes to look at the list of scenes you played out, remember your favorite ones fondly. And then here we're kind of describing some of those scenes, right? So the first part is I'm picking a scene and narrating when the birds were different. Are you okay, Internet?
Yeah, you just froze for a second.
Okay, cool. So I think the first scene is, maybe showing them, again, one in front of the other where the grouse is on the land and, the spoonbill was in the water. And this was early in the footage, right? And maybe there's a little bit of that, there's a little bit of narration about, these two birds come from quite different adaptations and backgrounds, but have found themselves both living in the Vasugan swamp.
And I think you kind of see like a shot of the spoonbill kind of doing its thing in the water, and then kind of cut to a parallel shot of the grouse doing its thing on the bog, and kind of this cut kind of showing the similarities but like differences in how they live.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So and then the documentary, I think, goes to a scene where I think maybe another scene where one of the birds is hurt. I think maybe the spoonbill has awkwardly landed and its wing is a little bit hurt. And I think we can see the grouse hopping up to it with like little insects, and it's kind of making a little pile of insects in front of that spoonbill as it is like recuperating, like laying under a tree.
These two creatures, although from remarkably different backgrounds, have learned to work together in what appears to be a semi-cooperative way. And so here we next see a scene where, and this kind of like plays off of the last scene where we see the two baby like chicks of the two different types of birds, both in the same nest, right? Yeah, maybe kind of shows them. Maybe this is when they're not quite like newborn chicks. They're like starting to be a little bit bigger. But it shows the two of them kind of like we saw near the nest where they were kind of like emulating each other, right?
Mm-hmm. So we see, I think, the spoonbill chick is bigger than the grouse. So you see kind of the spoonbill like awkwardly mimicking the little grouse, like pecking at the ground. But then you also see the little grousey doing the like zoom zoom spoonbill thing.
Nice.
So it's kind of, you kind of see them playing and like imitating each other back and forth. And we kind of see, as we see them imitating each other, kind of cuts to a shot of them older as like juveniles and adults when they're in different environments, kind of using these different techniques that they've learned. We see the spoonbill being able to forage for food on land, and we see the grouse being able to like stand at the edge of the water and kind of find food in the water. And I think this kind of emphasis, and the narrator emphasizes, when we look past our differences, we can learn a great many things.
Awesome. And you know, as they're saying that, like the camera's panning back, you know, from this this scene and kind of fading in and out to a wider focus of the environment. So it's kind of like showing us, you know, a little bit of like the swamplands and you know, all that other, like some of those gorgeous shots we saw in the beginning, right, of the different styles of Vesuvian swamp environments.
Thank you for joining us in exploring the majesty of our blue planet.
Nice.
Woo!
It's awesome.
Yay. So now we have the end of session questions, which I think we'll talk about the group questions and then, you know, reflect on the self-reflecting questions, and we can talk about those if you want to. So sure. What similarities do you see in each other's birds despite their differences?
I definitely see them both as they're, you know, they feel a little bit kind of both uncomfortable in their environment in some way, but they're kind of trying to prop each other up, you know, in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in these birds we kind of saw that I don't know if it's an instinct, but that desire to help. You know, whether it's for selfish or selfless reasons, there was that desire to, like, you know, cooperate with other birds.
Yep. So what do they say about each other? What does the relationship say about the world?
I kind of feel like it might be something where, like, they kind of sarcastically say, like, oh, he's all right. Like, I guess he's okay, but they actually really like each other.
Right. I kind of like that. Like it's at a certain point, maybe they've just kind of like learned to do their own thing. And yeah, there might be even part of that where it is like the day to day, they're like, oh yeah, that guy, that weirdo over there. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the same time, I don't think they would want to be in another place. Like when push comes to shove, you know, they will rely on each other. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, what does the relationship say about the world? I don't know. Maybe that, you know, we need to look past our differences.
Yeah. We can be weird together.
That's right.
Yeah.
Love it. So then we have self-reflection questions. How do you see yourself in your bird's weaknesses, eccentricities, and traits? Yeah, I think, you know, both of the birds, to me, like I don't feel like I'm very much of a predator. So like, I liked the idea that both of them, you know, were just trying to kind of like do their own weird thing, but occasionally they get bumped up against the world, and then they have to figure out how they're going to like hold strong there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can empathize with some of that a little bit.
Yeah. I definitely feel out of place in my environment most of the time. And, you know, it's nice to have friends you can rely on.
Yes. Nice.
And in terms of what I want to take away from this setting, kind of at a superficial sense, I think it's just a really cool place.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really glad we kind of stumbled upon this, like, really kind of odd place. You wouldn't think of a swamp being kind of in subarctic environment.
Yeah. No, I definitely I like that and like some of it was helped by the rules, right? It's like it's not like just go and choose a place. It's kind of like go look at 3 or so biomes. And so like even if you grabbed a couple of things that were kind of standard that you're used to seeing, if you wanted to, you can kind of combine them and do something weird, right?
Yeah.
And that just gives you a little bit more flexibility to play, I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah, it kind of renews a little bit of curiosity in the places in the world, which again, I think even if you're not talking about just looking at nature, just like exploring the landscape of humanity and other things that are around in the world or your city or whatever it is.
Yeah. Great. This was so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool game.